The sterile scent of the hospital corridor always felt a little sharp to Eleanor, but today it was overlaid with the sweet, nervous perfume she dabbed behind her ears that morning. Hospital regulations aside, a mother had certain standards, even when confined to a room. Her room, cheerful enough with a vase of bright, slightly wilting gladioli from Thomas, felt less like a sick room and more like a waiting station today. A station for a most important arrival. Thomas, her dear son, was bringing Clara. His Clara, the young woman he'd spoken of with such quiet reverence for months, the one he now talked about building a future with. Eleanor had only seen photographs, smiling, vibrant pictures of a woman with kind eyes and a cascade of light brown hair. But photos, Eleanor knew, were curated moments. They didn't capture the quiet heart, the true spirit of a person. Eleanor, a retired librarian who had spent her life immersed in stories of human nature, both real and fictional, believed that true character revealed itself in the small, unguarded moments. And she was about to meet Clara in one of life's less glamorous settings, a community hospital where Eleanor was recuperating from a pesky bout of pneumonia that had refused to budge. Thomas had insisted she stay until the doctor gave a definitive all clear. And truthfully, Eleanor wasn't in a rush to leave the quiet routine and the gentle care of the nurses, especially Mrs. Gable, the kindest and most patient of them all. Today, however, routine was replaced by fluttering anticipation. Thomas was meant to arrive mid-morning, bringing Clara after a work commitment downtown. He'd called earlier, his voice tight with frustration, explaining he was running late due to an unexpected issue. "Clara will come on ahead, Mother," he'd promised. "She's looking forward to meeting you. The driver will drop her at the main entrance." Eleanor understood. Thomas carried the weight of his responsibilities with earnest dedication, a trait she both admired and worried over. She told him not to rush, that she'd be perfectly fine waiting, and she would be. But the waiting felt longer now, tinged with the unfamiliar anxiety of a mother hoping her son's chosen partner would fit, truly fit, into the quiet corners of their lives. She decided not to wait in her room. The common room on her floor was brighter, with large windows overlooking a small, brave garden clinging to the hospital grounds. It was often populated by patients in various stages of recovery, visitors, and the occasional busy nurse. It felt less formal than a bedside meeting. Eleanor dressed carefully in her most comfortable, yet still presentable, soft cotton trousers and a pale blue cardigan. Her hair, usually styled with librarian-like precision, was simply tied back in a low bun. She looked, she knew, less like the Eleanor who hosted quiet tea parties and more like, well, like any woman recuperating in a hospital. Taking a seat by the window, she watched a robin hop on the damp grass outside. The air felt fresh, carrying the faint, earthy smell of spring. Across the room, old Mr. Henderson dozed in his armchair, a newspaper tented across his chest. Near the door, a young woman with worried eyes sat twisting a handkerchief. And in the far corner, nestled in a worn armchair, was Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, sweet soul, struggled with her eyesight and sometimes her memory. She was trying to read a large print book, holding it much too close to her face and squinting with frustration. Eleanor felt a familiar tug of compassion. Gently, she rose and walked over. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," Eleanor said softly, pulling up a chair. "Having a bit of trouble with your reading today?" Mrs. Gable looked up, her kind face crinkling in a smile. "Oh, Eleanor, dear. Yes, these letters keep dancing away from me." Eleanor sat beside her. "Would you like me to read to you for a while? I have a clear voice, you know. Comes from years of reading stories aloud." "Oh, that would be lovely, dear. Truly lovely." Mrs. Gable pushed the book towards her. It was a collection of comforting poems. Eleanor began to read, her voice a steady, soothing rhythm in the quiet room. She was engrossed in a passage about a garden in bloom when the doors to the common room swung open. Eleanor looked up, her heart giving a little leap. A young woman stood hesitantly in the doorway, scanning the room. It was Clara. She looked exactly like her photos, yet somehow more real, more uncertain. She wore a simple, elegant coat and carried a small bag. Her eyes, Eleanor noticed, held a mixture of shyness and expectation. Clara's gaze swept the room, landing on Eleanor and Mrs. Gable. Eleanor, in her plain clothes, her hair simply tied back, absorbed in reading to an elderly patient, clearly didn't resemble the image Clara must have built of Thomas's mother, the quietly distinguished former librarian. She saw someone who looked like, well, like a kind volunteer, or perhaps a dedicated hospital aide spending a moment with a patient. An unexpected impulse, swift and undeniable, seized Eleanor. It wasn't a planned test, not a calculated scheme. It was a sudden, almost playful opportunity that life, in its strange way, had presented. A chance to see Clara, truly see her, before the roles of potential daughter-in-law and mother were formally put on. A chance to see her interact without the pressure of making a good impression on Thomas's mother. What would she do? How would she behave? Eleanor closed the book and placed it gently on Mrs. Gable's lap. She stood up, offering a small, neutral smile as Clara approached. Clara reached them, her expression polite and slightly hesitant. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice pleasant. "Could you perhaps tell me where I might find Mrs. Eleanor Hayes? I believe she's a patient on this floor." She addressed Eleanor with a natural deference, the kind one might show to someone busy helping others. There was no hint of superiority, no impatience, just simple courtesy. Eleanor's impulse solidified. "Ah, Mrs. Hayes," she said, keeping her voice even, her eyes twinkling just slightly. "She stepped out for a moment, dear. Just down the hall, perhaps. Taking a little walk. She should be back shortly." Eleanor used her middle name, the one few people knew her by. "I'm Mary," she added, extending a hand slightly. "I help out here sometimes." Clara's face relaxed slightly. "Oh, it's lovely to meet you, Mary. I'm Clara. I'm here to visit her. Thomas is my partner." She shook Eleanor's hand warmly, her grip firm and genuine. "Thank you. I'll just wait here then, if that's all right." "Of course, dear," Eleanor said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Make yourself comfortable." She sat back down beside Mrs. Gable, who had returned to peering at her book. Clara sat down a little way off, glancing towards the hallway periodically. She didn't pull out a phone immediately, which Eleanor noted with quiet approval. Instead, she observed the room, her expression thoughtful. A few minutes passed in quiet waiting. Then the young woman near the door with the worried eyes suddenly burst into quiet tears. She fumbled in her bag, evidently unable to find a tissue. Clara, without a moment's hesitation, stood up. "Are you all right?" Clara asked gently, approaching the distressed woman. "Here, please, take these." She offered a small pack of tissues from her own bag. "Is there anything I can do?" The woman sniffled, taking the tissues gratefully. "Oh, thank you so much. It's my mother. She's having a procedure, and I'm so worried." "It's understandable to be worried," Clara said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. "But the doctors and nurses here are wonderful. Try to breathe deeply. Just being here for her is the most important thing." She stayed with the woman for a few minutes, talking quietly, offering calm reassurance. Eleanor watched, her heart warming. There was no fanfare, no show of exaggerated sympathy, just quiet, genuine kindness. Clara returned to her seat. A few minutes later, a nurse bustled through the common room, carrying an armful of magazines that tumbled to the floor. Clara was instantly on her feet. "Oh, let me help you with that," she said cheerfully, bending down to gather the scattered periodicals. She worked quickly and efficiently, stacking them neatly before handing them back to the grateful nurse. "There you go. Looks like a busy morning." "Tell me about it," the nurse laughed, adjusting the stack. "Thank you so much, dear. You're a lifesaver." She hurried off. Clara smiled after her, then noticed Mrs. Gable was struggling again with her book. Instead of just sitting and waiting, Clara walked over. "Hello again, Mrs. Gable," Clara said with a warm smile. "Are you enjoying your reading? Mary was just reading to you, wasn't she? Would you like me to read for a little while? My grandmother loved this collection." Mrs. Gable brightened immediately. "Oh, would you, dear? That would be ever so kind." Clara sat down, picking up the book. She didn't read in Eleanor's measured, trained librarian's voice. Her voice was softer, perhaps a little less resonant, but filled with such gentle patience and clear affection. She held the book correctly, at a comfortable distance, and read with feeling, pausing occasionally to make a small, kind comment to Mrs. Gable about the poem. Eleanor sat watching them, a profound sense of peace settling over her. This wasn't the formal, perhaps slightly intimidating meeting she had anticipated. There was no stilted conversation, no awkward silences to fill. Instead, she was witnessing Clara in her natural element, simply being kind, observant, and willing to help wherever it was needed, without being asked, without knowing she was being observed by the most important person. Clara read for nearly 20 minutes, her voice a calm murmur. Mrs. Gable had leaned her head back, her eyes closed, a serene smile on her face. Clara finished the poem, closed the book gently, and just sat quietly for a moment, holding Mrs. Gable's hand. It was a small gesture, easily missed, but Eleanor saw it, a simple, human connection offered without expectation. Just as Clara was about to speak to Mrs. Gable again, the common room doors opened once more, and Thomas hurried in. He looked relieved to see his mother. "Mother, I'm so sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over." He started, his eyes scanning the room before landing on the corner where Eleanor and Clara sat together. His face broke into a wide, relieved smile. "Ah, you found her. Clara, you're here. Mother, this is—" Thomas stopped mid-sentence, a puzzled look crossing his face. He saw his mother, dressed simply, sitting beside Clara, who was holding Mrs. Gable's hand. He saw the comfortable ease between them, but also the setting. "Mother?" Thomas said again, walking towards them. Clara looked up, smiling warmly at Thomas. "Oh, Thomas, you're here. I've been waiting for Mrs. Hayes. Mary here," she gestured to Eleanor with genuine affection, "has been keeping me company and reading to Mrs. Gable." Thomas reached them, his brow furrowed slightly in confusion. He looked at Eleanor, then at Clara, then back at Eleanor. "Mary," he repeated, his voice questioning. He turned to Eleanor. "Mother, are you all right? Did something happen?" Eleanor smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached her eyes. She stood up fully this time, turning to Clara. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice softening, losing the slight formality she'd adopted as Mary. "I must confess something. Thomas looks rather confused." She took Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. "When you arrived, you asked for Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, and seeing me like this, perhaps you didn't recognize me from photos. Or maybe you thought I was a volunteer. And well, an old librarian can sometimes be a little mischievous. I introduced myself as Mary. But Thomas is right. I am Eleanor Hayes." Clara's eyes widened, a look of absolute surprise crossing her face. She glanced from Eleanor to Thomas, then back to Eleanor. You're Mrs. Hayes? Thomas's mother?" She looked at Eleanor's simple clothes, her understated appearance, so different from the elegant woman in the photographs Thomas had shown her over the years. Eleanor nodded, her smile unwavering. "I am, and I must apologize for my little deception. But you see, it gave me a precious opportunity. An opportunity to see you, Clara, simply being yourself, without the pressure of meeting Thomas's mother." Her voice grew earnest. "And in the short time you thought I was just Mary, you showed me such genuine kindness. You helped a stranger find tissues, you offered assistance to a busy nurse without being asked, and you sat and read to sweet Mrs. Gable with such tender patience. I saw your heart, Clara, and it is beautiful." Clara's surprise slowly melted into a blush, followed by a wide, radiant smile. "Oh, Mrs. Hayes, Eleanor, I had no idea." She laughed, a clear, lovely sound. "I just saw people who needed a little help, or maybe someone to listen." Thomas, who had been watching this exchange with growing understanding and a happy, relieved smile, stepped forward. "Mother, you sly thing!" He put an arm around Eleanor, then reached out to Clara. "And Clara, my wonderful Clara, I knew you were like this. But it makes me so incredibly happy that you got to see it for yourself, Mother." The formal barrier Eleanor had worried about dissolved completely in that moment. Clara hadn't needed to perform, hadn't needed to try to impress. She had simply been herself, in a moment of everyday human interaction, and that self had shone brighter than any curated image could. "Please call me Eleanor, dear," Eleanor said, her voice warm with affection. "And thank you. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Clara's eyes sparkled. "And thank you, Eleanor, for For letting me see you too. Not the image, but you. Reading to Mrs. Gable, being Mary, it makes meeting you feel like meeting a friend. The rest of the visit was easy, comfortable, and filled with warmth. They settled into chairs, Thomas sitting between them, his hands holding one of theirs. They talked, not about business or impressing anyone, but about simple things. The quiet life Eleanor enjoyed, Clara's love for reading and gardening, Thomas's latest project. Clara listened attentively when Eleanor spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and shared stories of her own life with an open heart. Eleanor watched her son and this young woman together, a profound sense of rightness filling her. Thomas looked happy, truly at peace, and Clara looked at him with such clear love and respect. As the afternoon drew to a close and Thomas announced it was time for Clara to catch her train, she'd come specifically to meet Eleanor before heading to a weekend workshop. Eleanor held Clara's hand once more. "This was not the meeting I expected, Clara," Eleanor said. "It was so much better." Clara leaned down and gently hugged Eleanor. "Me too, Eleanor. Much better." After they left, the common room settled back into its quiet hum. Eleanor sat by the window again, watching the robin. Her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She had worried, as mothers do, about her son's happiness, about the person he would choose to share his life with. She had expected to scrutinize, to perhaps feel a little protective reserve, but instead she had seen genuine goodness bloom in an ordinary moment, witnessed through a simple, unintended disguise. She hadn't just met Clara. She had met the quiet strength, the inherent kindness, and the beautiful soul of the woman who loved her son. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that Thomas had chosen wisely. Her son was not just getting a partner, he was gaining a true companion, and Eleanor, she suspected, was gaining a daughter of the heart. The sharp scent of the hospital no longer felt so strong. It was overlaid now with a sweet, lingering scent of kindness, and that, Eleanor knew, was the most healing fragrance of all.